Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2018 slasher film, Hellfest. Fun going in, hell getting out. Now, Hellfest is one of those movies that gets a fair amount of bad reviews, so I went into this with very low expectations, and it surprised me. I enjoyed the hell out of this movie. I thought this was a fun slasher. I thought it was honestly one of the best slashers I've seen in a long time. Even though it doesn't have as high of a body count as other slasher films, even though it isn't as gory as some of the other slashers, I thought it was one of the better slashers I've seen in years because of the fact that it had a fun, fairly unique setting, and it harkened back to the days of slashers from the 80s where you had a lot of likable, charismatic characters. Maybe not necessarily with a lot of depth, but characters that were having fun and had actual charisma and personality to them. So you genuinely grew to care about them. So it actually made it into something that was legitimately kind of suspenseful and had some real tension. Now, the film is directed by Gregory Plotkin, and I honestly thought he did a really good job. He's worked on a lot of different films throughout the years as an assistant editor, working on visual effects. This was actually not his directorial debut. He directed some other things before this. I think one of them was a Paranormal Activity sequel, and I definitely felt that this was absolutely one of his better efforts as a director. He also helped edit the movie as well. In fact, I think he was the only editor. No, David Egan also edited the film. But yeah, he did double duty here as an editor and as a director. And Gregory Plotkin, I think he showed a lot of genuine talent here, especially when it comes to shooting the Halloween Horror Nights inspired attraction, the different horror mazes. He did a great job capturing the authentic nature of this horror night attraction, and he worked really well when it comes to the lighting. I love the way this film is lit with all these different colors and shadows, and it's a really nice looking film, and it pops visually, and I think a good reason for that is Gregory Plotkin's direction, as well as, of course, the cinematography by Jose David Montero. But yeah, Plotkin, I think he did a good job directing the movie. I know I'm repeating myself, but what else can you really say when it comes to the direction? I mean, he had a good amount of movement when it comes to the camera. It wasn't just staying in one place. There were some ambitious shots that I thought were rather impressive in terms of the certain angle that he chose, or the way that some sequences were shot in terms of showcasing a wide shot, or using the camera to pan around certain mazes to really create a very disorientating and genuinely spooky and atmospheric series of sequences. Overall, yeah, I thought he did a great job directing this movie. And he worked well with his cast. He really maintained a very fun environment and vibe that definitely did come across on film. And yeah, I thought he was definitely a director who was also really passionate about this movie. Like, you could tell that he had a lot of love for this film, and it definitely did showcase on the screen. It features a screenplay by Seth M. Sherwood, Blair Butler, and Akela Cooper. And this is a script that doesn't reinvent the slasher genre, but that's not necessarily a problem for me, because at this point in time, we've had so many slashers that there really was no way to reinvent the genre to begin with. I think this film and its script is getting way too much criticism for the fact that it doesn't reinvent the wheel. And to me, that's completely unfair because there's been hundreds of slashers. So I don't really think there's a way that it could have possibly reinvented the wheel. Yeah, it has a lot of cliches in it. Yeah, there are a lot of things in this film that you might have seen in other slasher films, but there aren't that many slasher films that take place in this environment. So that does bring something new to the table, as does the fact that certain characters get killed off earlier than you might expect. So that also adds a bit of unpredictability to the film. I also think it does a good job having some sequences that have some actual suspense and actual tension, like the scene in the it's kind of a funhouse kind of thing where you get into a cart and then you go throughout this uh, um, attraction, and it did a good job building suspense by having a scene where you have multiple people dressed up like this guy. So you think that it's one thing, but then you find out that this is just a pretty common look for some of these haunt actors. So when one of them shows up in that scene, or multiple, actually, what happens is if it really does, it builds up things really well because it establishes this slasher character who has this look fairly early on in the movie. So then when you get to that sequence and he's stalking our lead final girl, and then you get the reveal afterwards that there are multiple haunt actors who were wearing similar outfits or identical outfits, it really messes with your head, and it adds an extra layer to the script that wouldn't be there otherwise. And as a slasher, it doesn't take too long to get things going. The slasher shows up and starts killing people pretty early on in the movie. You get a bit of a prologue early on to establish that this is a killer who does this year after year. This isn't something that he just does a little bit or he's just started doing. Um, and I actually like the look of the killer, and it's kind of generic, but that's a good way to fit in when it comes to this environment. It makes it so he can really hide in plain sight. And I think that's rather scary, to be honest. I also like the idea that you never really get to know that much about this killer. You just know that he likes to kill people at horror haunt attractions, and he has a family. It's revealed at the end of the movie that he has a family and he's kind of a normal guy when he doesn't decide to go on a killing spree once a year. And I like that. I like the fact that it gives you a little bit of depth to this character, the fact that he's a family man, but you never see his face and you never really get that much more information when it comes to who he is or why he's doing this. I don't think any of that is necessary in a film like this anyway. So it was actually nice to see that when it comes to a slasher that just stuck to its guns, so to speak, and was like, "Nah, we're not gonna go that route to make you sympathize with the killer or do any of this stuff. He's just a sadistic bastard who happens to be a family man." I didn't mind that. Um, and when it comes to the characters, it doesn't have a lot of depth for these characters, but the film provides a lot of room for these characters to improvise, at least the actors who play these characters to improvise and just have fun and go along for the ride with the audience, and I think that goes a long way when it comes to this movie. These characters, they're set up in ways that work. You get a little bit of backstory with the lead girl, and one of her best friends. So Natalie, as well as Brooke, and that's kind of all you really need. You get this whole thing where Natalie is crushing on this other guy, Gavin, I believe is his name, and yeah, Gavin, and she has a crush on him, and there's this sort of romance that sparks between the two. But the script really throws you for a loop and kills Gavin off very early on in the movie. And then ultimately, of course, Natalie is the final girl. She's the final survivor. But there are some other things, though, that aren't as predictable. I like the setup with trying to look up Taylor, and how it appears as if she was killed on stage with a guillotine, but it was all a part of some stage show, and then afterwards she gets put into the guillotine by the killer, but when the killer drops the guillotine on her neck, it doesn't cut her head off right away. It just goes a little bit into the back of her neck and cuts her up, but doesn't actually decapitate her or incapacitate her enough in order to kill her. So she actually manages to escape, but then later on the killer does corner her and stabs her. But I like that. I like that it wasn't initially what you might expect. It wasn't just whoop, guillotine, head cut off for real this time. It's not an effect. I don't think you see that very often in these kind of slashers. And I really love the finale that takes place in one of the horror mazes. I love the way it's shot. I love the way that things are set up with that whole sequence. There's a good amount of suspense and thrills in that scene, as well as gore. Like there's a kill earlier on in that sequence where one of the members of the pack of friends who are going to the horror haunt gets his eye stabbed, and it looks like something straight out of an Italian horror movie. And yes, there are some moments where it's a bit unrealistic, but that's honestly the norm when it comes to slashers. And there are some other moments where it might have been nice to have a little bit more gore, maybe a little bit more to the film when it comes to the kills, to make things a little bit more visceral and memorable. Although it doesn't shy away from that. I mean, there's that sequence with Gavin where he gets his head crushed with a mallet, and it's a pretty brutal kill. But yeah, it's one of those films where it's a simple plot. A group of friends go to a horror haunt attraction, and there's a killer who's on the loose and hunting them down one by one. But it works, and it's fun. That's the other thing. The script definitely understood that this wasn't something that was meant to be taken that seriously. This was something that was just supposed to be good old-fashioned slasher fun, and I really like that about this script. I like that it was simple but effective. And see, that's the thing. I think, yeah, it's a competent slasher, and that doesn't mean that it doesn't deserve praise. It doesn't mean that it doesn't deserve rub for being as competent and skilled as it is, despite the fact that it's not the most original slasher or the most original horror film out there. So yeah, I think overall it's a pretty solid script. And speaking of solid, I think this has a solid cast as well. Amy Forsyth as Natalie. I really liked her Thought she was actually one of the better final girls that I've seen in a slasher film in a while. Rain Edwards was fine too as Brooke. I thought Amy and Rain had some really good chemistry. Really thought that the two were very close friends. Bex-Taylor Klaus was kind of annoying at times as Taylor because of the shtick that she was going for. But then there were other times where she was kind of funny, and I didn't mind her. So I didn't hate her. It's like one of those performances where she kind of got on my nerves at times, but not every single time that she was on screen. So it was just one of those things where it was just kind of on the performance. Christian James as Quinn, and Matt Mercurio as Asher, and Roby Attal as Gavin. They were serviceable. They were decent enough as well. I thought the three of them also had good chemistry. Honestly, I think the entire cast had good chemistry, and that was something that the producers and a lot of people involved with the film really made a point to emphasize when it comes to the casting. They wanted to make sure that they had actors and actresses who had good chemistry and worked well with one another. And that was definitely the case here. And it really did add to the fun of the movie. And you also had a fun cameo by Tony Todd as a carnival barker. But yeah, I thought it was a pretty solid cast. Likeable enough performers, playing likable characters. What a novel concept. A horror film with likable characters? Wow. And that's another thing that the producers and the director and a lot of other people involved with the production of this movie emphasized, is that these characters had to be likable, because otherwise it wouldn't be as much fun and there wouldn't be any suspense. And I felt that they were right on the money. I mean, one of the producers for this was Gail Ann Hurd, who has a long history of producing really solid, if not spectacular, films from various different genres. So she definitely knows what she's doing. Another point of emphasis was to do as much as they possibly could for real, with very little CGI. And that's something that definitely did pay dividends when it comes to this movie. They hired an actual theme park attraction designer to design the horror mazes and the other attractions. So that gave the film a certain authenticity and realism that was really good and really elevated the film. And yeah, I just loved watching these different horror mazes. I could not wait to see which next maze was going to show up on the screen. They built everything for real, on set, on sound stages, and in some instances they didn't even show the cast these mazes or anything until they started shooting. So the reactions from these cast members, they were completely genuine when the haunt actors were popping up and trying to scare them, or they went into the maze and they were horrified or disturbed by the things that they were seeing. That was all real reactions. So that also lent a certain amount of authenticity to the film as well, which I think is overlooked by a lot of the film's harsh critics, who gave this film really low ratings. And yeah, all the other technical aspects of this film are fairly tremendous for what it is. The cinematography, it looks great, especially when it comes to the way that the different mazes are shot, or the whole park itself. It's edited excellently by Gregory Plotkin and David Egan. This is very evident when it comes to the scenes where the killer is going after the protagonists, or in the finale when the protagonists are turning the tables on the killer and trying to hunt him down. And it also features a pretty decent score by Bear McCreary. Actually, decent is an understatement. I think it's actually a good score. A good score by Bear McCreary. A lot of synthesizer work, but it's the kind of stuff that really does fit when it comes to this genre, this kind of throwback film. In a lot of ways, this felt like a slasher that you could have seen in the 90s or the late 80s, but with a little bit of a modern twist in terms of uh, technology and the way that certain horror mazes were put together and shown on the screen. And yeah, it only costs like 5.5 million, but every bit of that is on the screen. Like, it does not look like a cheap horseshit type of horror film. And it's only like 89 minutes, and that's with the end credits. You take away the end credits, it's even shorter. Like, it goes by at a really quick pace. It doesn't lollygag. It doesn't take its time or too much time when it comes to getting the blood flowing or starting the body count or showing these characters and their reactions to the horror haunt and the different mazes within it. So yeah, I mean, it's not the same kind of thing as, for instance, Bloodfest, which came out the same year, which I know Bloodfest has its fans, and I had some fun with it too. I might share my thoughts on that one sometime as well. But Bloodfest is a very different kind of movie. Like, that's more of like a satire of slasher tropes. Hellfest is just more of a traditional slasher movie with a really well shot and well executed concept and setting. So yeah, if you're looking for a fun slasher film or just a fun horror movie to put on this October or next October or really anytime, Hellfest is definitely one of those films, if you ask me. I would definitely give it a shot, despite the fact that it got a lot of bad reviews and didn't really do that much in the box office. Um, yeah, I agree with the Film Stage's review of this. It says Hellfest is a giddy and almost euphoric horror experience. It really is. It's really close to actually going to a Halloween Horror Nights kind of attraction and experiencing it with your own eyes. And it's definitely something like that in 4K. This film looks fantastic in this format. So, yeah, I honestly could see this being a cult classic years from now. I could see this being something where it gets a lot of newfound praise and appreciation as the years go by from horror fans, because it is a really good time, and it's a well executed, well shot, solid slasher. But anyway, thank you for watching my review of Hellfest. And until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.